The stadiums of that era weren't safe places. Concrete stands shook, cleats cut into the grass, and any action could turn in seconds. Soccer was loud, raw, uncontrollable, but sometimes something happened that silenced even tens of thousands of voices. No cheering, no whistling, just silence. These are 7 soccer players who silence an entire stadium. And now, it begins with the first name. Top 1, Patrick Battiston. At the peak of his career, Patrick Battiston was an integral part of a team built on control, discipline, and stability, international titles, major tournaments, a defender you could trust when games were on the line. He wasn't a player of drama, but of order. And that's precisely why the moment hit so hard. A long ball, a run into the penalty area, the goalkeeper comes out, then the collision. Not a typical foul, no chaos. Battiston stays down, still, motionless, teeth on the grass, his gaze empty. Within seconds, the atmosphere changes. Tens of thousands of people fall silent simultaneously. No whistles, no protests, no cheers. Just a silence that feels heavier than any noise before. Today, analyses explain this impact with speed, mass, and angles that can instantly disable the body. Back then, there were no terms for it, only the feeling that something had gone too far. Battiston's name lives on in retrospectives and archive footage. Not as a scene, but as a boundary. As a moment when a stadium realized that soccer had suddenly become too real. Top 2, Ewald Lehnen. Ewald Lehnen stood for intensity, pace, and a style of play that knew no safety zone. He was a winger at a time when tackles weren't measured, but came head-on. Games with him were fast, physical, unsettled. That's exactly how this moment began. A sprint along the sideline, an opponent slides in, the contact comes deep, brutal, without delay. Lehnen goes down and immediately gets back up. But what the camera captures makes the stadium freeze. An open gash, the flesh visible, the leg marked by something that no longer looks repairable. The reaction doesn't come as a scream, but as silence. Players stop, spectators cover their mouths. Nobody knows where to look. Medically, this moment can be explained by a cutting effect, speed, and the lack of protective structure in the equipment of the time. Emotionally, it's still hard to grasp today. It wasn't a breakdown, but a shock in slow motion. Today, Lehnen comes up in conversations about the toughness of past generations. His image doesn't just represent pain, but the realization that soccer was once a place where vulnerability became visibly exposed. Some scenes don't scream, they cut. Top 3, Luke Nielis. Luke Nielis was a striker who never had to be loud to control games. His numbers didn't come from chaos, but from timing, from movements between the lines, from finishes that seemed to arrive a second too early for any defender. In decisive moments, he was there where others were only just arriving. That's exactly why the scene that followed hit with such force. A run into the penalty area, a contact, a wrong angle. The impact sounds dull, not spectacular. Nielis falls and stays down. The reaction is delayed, almost incredulous. Players look not at the ball, but down. The stands lose their noise, as if someone had turned off the sound. Modern reconstructions speak of rotational forces, of a stress that bones cannot compensate for. Back then, you just saw a body that no longer moved, and instinctively understood that something here was final. Nielis never returned to that level. His career didn't end with applause, but with a moment no one could celebrate. Sometimes it's not a final whistle that decides a game, but a silence that ends everything. Top 4, Alf-Inge Haaland. Alf-Inge Haaland wasn't a player of headlines, but one coaches needed when games got tough. Strong runner, disciplined, physically present, someone who closed spaces and sought out duels without staging them. That's why the moment seemed so unsettling. A tackle in midfield, not a final, not a penalty area, just a normal ball. The contact comes late, deep, with full force. Haaland goes down, not dramatically, not screaming, just falling. What follows is not an explosion, but a slow realization. He stays down, no movement. Players hesitate, referees wait. The stadium lowers its volume as if someone instinctively showed consideration. Later, doctors explain this moment with repeated strain, with forces that had accumulated over years until a single hit triggered everything. In that moment, no one knew. They just saw that something was wrong. Holland's career didn't end immediately, but it lost its direction. Today, his name comes up in conversations about the body's limits, about risks that are only recognized when it's too late. Some careers don't break with a bang, but with a silent impact. Top 5. Eduardo da Silva. Eduardo da Silva was an attacker whose game thrived on lightness, quick steps, precise finishes, goals from tight angles, as if there was space there that others didn't see. He moved through defenses without touching them, and that's precisely why the moment seems so brutal. A tackle, a stretched leg. The contact comes too deep, too hard, too direct. Eduardo falls, twists, and everyone immediately knows this was no ordinary collision. The camera pans away, but it's too late. Players react not with protest, but by turning away. Hands over faces, steps backward. The stadium loses its sound, as if someone had held their breath. Later, analyses explain the injury with leverage, with forces that joints cannot absorb. In that moment, no explanation is needed. The body tells all. Eduardo returned, but something was missing. Not the will, but the trust in his own next step. His career continued, but it carried this moment like a shadow. There are scenes that don't scream because they are too gruesome to be loud. Top 6. Giuseppe Meazza. Giuseppe Meazza was more than just a name on the scoreboard. He was the center of a game that revolved around his movements, his technique, his goals, his presence. Stadiums came to see him, not to be surprised. And that's exactly why the moment felt so alien. A run, a contact, not a brutal tackle, but an awkward twist, a collapse without warning. Meazza goes down, holds his leg, tries to get up, and fails. The reaction is not loud but cautious. Players approach slowly, as if they don't want to disturb the moment. In the stands, a silence descends that is untypical for places that usually live on anticipation. Later, people speak of overuse, of a body that has carried too many games, too many duels. In this moment, you just see that even the greatest figures suddenly appear fragile. Meazza continued to play, but never again without this shadow. His name lives on in stadiums, streets, and trophies, but also in the memory of a moment when admiration briefly turned into concern. Sometimes a single wrong step is enough to silence an entire stadium. Top 7. Gunnar Nordahl. Gunnar Nordahl was a force of nature. Goals didn't just happen around him, he forced them. His numbers seemed oversized even for a physically rough era. His presence in the penalty area made defenders back away even before the ball arrived. When Nordahl charged, the game moved aside. And that's exactly why the moment was so unsettling. A hard tackle, not a foul, not a scandal, just raw force. Nordahl goes down, stays down, and for the first time, this body doesn't seem unstoppable. The silence comes immediately. No murmuring, no gasp of shock, but a collective pause. Players stand still, as if they understood that something fundamental had happened. Later analyses speak of overuse, of a body that had played beyond normal limits for years. In that moment, no diagnosis was needed. You saw that even physical dominance can come to an end. Nordahl returned, kept scoring, but the aura had a crack. His legend endured, but from then on it also carried this moment within it. When even strength falls silent, a stadium listens. These moments belong to a time when soccer knew no safety distances. A generation where bodies collided, careers turned in seconds, and silence was louder than any goal celebration. They remind us that behind every myth stood a human, vulnerable, finite, real. If you want to dive deeper into these stories, join us further on this journey through the darker chapters of the game. Subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts, and don't forget that some legends were written not by goals, but by silence.